Hello and welcome everyone. As we give everyone else a few minutes to join into the session, let's have an interesting question to all of you. What do you want AI to do for you that it's not doing right now? And I can kick off by saying I'd love AI to be able to tell me every piece of clothing I've ever owned and is currently in my closet so I don't have to think what I need to wear today. Prerna, Vale, why don't you share what you would like AI to do for you? Prerna?
Yeah, plan my holidays for me. That's something that I enjoy, but it does feel quite stressful. So I love them to do it the way I would do it. That's the important bit, not like any travel agent.
Yeah. Valekumar?
Hey, thanks, Subal. I probably like AI to let me know where I stand on my bench press max when I compare myself with everybody who hits the gym this week. I would love to see something like that.
That's an interesting request as well.
Yeah.
Let's see what we have from our audience in the chat here. Do my do my ironing. That yes, I think ironing is a chore that can be taken away as well for sure. We should now get started. Hello and welcome everyone to yet another edition of our In the Know product showcase series. My name is Subul and I work in product marketing at Beroe. Today we're going to talk about decision grade intelligence in the age of generative AI. And we'll explore why speed alone isn't enough for decisions that deliver real impact. I'm joined today by Prerna and Valekumar. Prerna leads Beroe's product and solution strategy globally as our chief product officer, with a sharp focus on one thing: making sure that procurement teams aren't just moving faster, but they're making better, more defendable decisions. And with nearly 2 decades in procurement technology, she helps shape how AI and human expertise come together to support these decisions when the stakes are really high, which makes her the perfect person to frame today's conversation. We have Whale Kumar, who spends his days at the sharp end of procurement, making sure that he's able to use intelligence as well as insights and make sure that they don't just sound right, but they hold up when they're questioned. He brings together expert validation, data, and AI to turn information into decisions that teams can confidently stand behind. And as we explore decision grade intelligence today, Wales the perfect person to walk us through what that's actually going to look like in practice. Welcome, Prerna and Whale Kumar.
Thanks, Subbu. Glad to be here
Thanks,
today.
Subal. Yeah, likewise, trying to live up to your intro. So thank you.
We'll start by looking at the gap between AI outputs and what procurement teams actually need to make confident, decision ready calls. From there, we're going to break down what truly makes intelligence decision grade, especially when the stakes are high and the validation really matters. We're also then going to share examples of the kinds of high impact decisions that demand this level of rigor. And finally, walk through how Beroe supports confident, defensible decision making. A quick note on housekeeping before we dive in. Please feel free to post your questions anytime using the question and answer section or even the chat. And we're going to make time towards the end of the session to address them live. You'll also have the opportunity to request a personalized demo at the end, and a recording of today's session will be shared with you afterward. Prerna, can you start us off by telling us what you're hearing from the world, how you see the use of AI right now?
Yeah, I think this is a sentence that actually summarizes how I'm seeing AI and all the discussions we've been having over the last couple of years. And when I'm talking about AI, I'm definitely talking about more of the recent developments with generative AI, with LLMs, and everything we're hearing around us. I think this statement really captures what I see in two ways. I think there is a little bit of an echo that's coming. So maybe Subul, if you and Vail Kumar want to go off audio while I'm talking, that might help. Okay. Yeah. So I think this is a statement that I've kind of, for me, it summarizes one, I do want AI to do my dishes. So that is one thing that I do want it to do. But more importantly, I think, when I look back and say, we all got a dishwasher, what happened at that time, right? It wasn't that the job went away. We still have to load the dishes, you have to scrape it off, otherwise some of them don't get cleaned properly, you have to unload the dishwasher. So while you're not doing dishes in the way you were doing dishes prior to a dishwasher, you are still doing other jobs. And I think if I look at what's happening around us, and if we move to the next slide, it really is that we haven't necessarily said, okay, AI is doing the job in full. It's really about what job is AI doing, and therefore, is my job changing? And a traditional way of doing things, is that changing? So, if I take a couple of examples here, so you look at software development, there's of course a lot of talk about AI is writing code. Now, does that take away need for software developers? I don't think that's the reality, and we have seen enough around that. And what's been proven is that yes, AI can write code, it can give you a first draft, but what is it that the software teams are then doing? They are having to debug, they're having to test, they are having to test that it actually integrates, that code is something that creates enterprise grade software. Similarly, if you look at even legal research, and there's a lot, I think we've all seen in the last week or so. Yes, AI can do your initial contract scanning. It can come up with, some things for you to review, etc. But there is new work that's being created, and are you actually seeing that productivity improvement? And I'm talking to customers who've done a lot of pilots in the last many months. I think what's emerging is that yes, we are all asking a question that uh, you know, can AI do this job, or can AI do something for me in a different way? I think the bigger question is that if AI can do this job, what do my humans need to do, right? Do new jobs get created? Do we do things differently? And ultimately, you have to look at, like with any other technology, it's not just about bringing in new technology. And in this case, let's say bringing in co-work, bringing in an agent, bringing in anything and saying, okay, here you go. And it's not a silver bullet, it's not no magic. You have to look at that technology implementation in context of an operating model change, a reskilling or an upskilling of your workforce, and things like that. So I think if we look at the current state of LLMs, generative AI, I love this technology. I think we are up for the biggest change in how we do work in the last many decades. But it is not something that's a silver bullet. It's not something that changes what humans are there for, which is judgment, which is contextual decision making in this world around us. So I would just say that from a big picture perspective, it is, if we zoom out a little bit, the work hasn't disappeared. It is just moved. And I think as we all embrace this technology, it's really about saying that where do we want that work to now be? What is that new work that we all should be looking at in whichever area it is? And if we then zoom in a little bit on procurement intelligence and the space that we are here to talk about today, I think for everybody's benefit, Beroe's been in the procurement intelligence space now for 20 years. And of course, this is a question that we've been looking at very deeply over the last many years. I think the point is the access has exploded, right? We all have access to tools, we have access to more data, but is that actually leading to better decisions? Is that something that's leading to answers faster? I think the sense that we are getting from speaking with customers is that there's definitely more data, more tools, and more AI. But as a category manager, as a sourcing manager, should I now start spending my time on reviewing the output? And let's say it's 80% there, even 85% there. Is that where I should spend my time, or do I spend my time talking to my suppliers, talking to my business stakeholders, and doing stuff which truly require that human connection, human judgment? And I think the other angle we look at this is that yes, this data and the access to intelligence that seems quite fast and quite plausible, is that actually more noise or is it signal? And ultimately, I think the true test is any technology, any tool, intelligence that you're getting, is it really giving you time back, or is it now you having doing jobs which didn't exist for you before? So I think that's the summary, Subul, from what we are hearing from customers. I was talking to some of our clients as well, that information abundance and this access at fingertips hasn't necessarily changed. It is, of course, something that we need to embrace and think about more holistically. But in the main, just saying, okay, can I get data from a chat GPT or a Claude isn't necessarily something that we are seeing of value. So I think that's definitely the big picture view that I'd like to share with the group. But I'd also like to hear Vale's thought. He's obviously, out there with our clients on a day-to-day basis, with our analysts, looking at how we use AI internally. So Vale, I'll hand over to you to share your perspective on where you see, especially when it comes to procurement and procurement intelligence, generative AI, and the pros and cons.
Sure. Thanks, Prerna. But you actually make it very tough for me to come out with the good points because you've taken them all. But hi, everyone. Hello. And with 20 years behind us at Beroe, it's now super obvious that Gen AI can produce a seemingly confident answer in seconds. No denying that. It's very exciting, but also a little terrifying. Fortunately, procurement has already trained us and this entire room to think, great, now show me the evidence. And yes, Gen AI is being held to the same standard. So with that as a background, if procurement had a superpower, it would be turning, for example, 200 Excel sheets into one decision. AI kind of helps get us there faster. The headline is that we don't have an information problem anymore. We have a confidence problem. The reality for almost all of us here is that I can find 50 answers in 3 minutes. I just can't defend most of them in a steering committee, right? So what I want to pivot around is what has changed, which is essentially more sources, more signals, faster cycles, but also more noise and contradiction. The procurement reality to what Prerna was talking about is that category strategy, supplier risk, negotiations now move faster than ever than traditional validation cycles. The frame of reference in our mind is crystal clear. Gen AI is excellent at speeding up drafts, pattern finding, and synthesis, but not at owning accountability. So, where it shines in procurement is essentially first pass landscape scans, class comparisons, scenario brainstorming, summarizing large packs of data. But I think what's important to note is where it potentially might break if you're not very careful about it is when the decision needs traceability, current facts, consistent logic under cross examination. My plain English model view to Prerna's question is that LLMs generate plausible answers, but without grounding, they can be confidently wrong, right? I'm pro choice, pro AI. So the credibility bridge over here is that grounding patterns like the RAG model, which all of you know, which is the retrieval augmented generation model, reduce hallucinations by retrieving from authoritative, trusted, credible sources before answering. So there is a above AI setup. AI gets to about 60 to 80% real fast, but decision grade comes from validation and judgment, to Prerna's point. So if you go with let's separate AI assisted analysis from AI justified decisions, where is that particular line? Because teams either overanalyze or mistiming or move fast with low defensibility. Hence, the transition line, in my view, is that the goal isn't about more insight, it's insight that can survive scrutiny. That's the way I look at it. So, Prerna, I've heard you use a certain phrase when it comes to industrial strength intelligence. I call it that very non eloquently, but I think you've got a more elegant terminology and a certain thinking style which you coined, very Anthony Bourdainish. What was that again, please?
I Yeah, I think we're calling it decision grade intelligence. So I think a little bit of history for the group here. So I would be lying if sometime in the summer last year we were in a leadership meeting. Yeah, if this wasn't happening at a Beroe leadership meeting where we were like, okay, we are seeing, there are these conferences where somebody saying, oh, you can create your own agent and get market intelligence, or you can really ask ChatGPT and it'll tell you what's happening in a certain market or what's happening in this category or that category. And obviously it was something that we as Beroe have to think about because that's our bread and butter. So at that point, I think we were starting to talk about what we're now saying is decision grade intelligence, which really is what we started out here, right? Like, it's not that people don't have access to data, but is everybody having access to just web information, which is on the websites of companies or being published on the internet? And bear in mind, a lot of data that's now being generated is all synthetic data, right? Given a lot of data is being generated by the LLMs themselves. So what we were looking at then is that, yes, we have customers who've trusted Beroe for many years. They continue to trust us. So how do we clarify what is it that we provide that you can't get from an LLM, and what is it that you really come to Beroe for? And this is the way we framed it. I think if we apply three things here, one is you get an answer, it looks plausible, it's maybe 80% at 85, in some cases even it may be 95% accurate, but can you just defend that, like, without yourself having to then validate it, source check it, confirm that is it actually true? And like I said in the beginning, is that the job we want category managers to do? Is that the job we want sourcing managers to do? Or is that something that you'd leave to a MI company that has been doing it for 20 years, right? Similarly, of course, now there's a lot of improvement. So you have source citations. You can see where the LLMs or, whatever tool you're using got the data from. But ultimately, is it explainable? Does it have the context? And I think all of us would probably recognize, and I'm seeing some of the comments in chat as well. I think there is that nuance, right? Like, what's happening in the cocoa market does mean something different to company A versus company B, because yes, there is a perspective on price changes and what's coming down the pipe, but is that relevant in your context based on where you buy from, based on your supply base, based on your internal strategy? So that context and that explainability is super important. And ultimately, like I said, if you had somebody like a Beroe analyst saying, I am saying this is what the price forecast for carbon steel is going to be, or this is where, we think the market for legal services contracting models is going, then there is accountability associated with that. So I think the way we are looking at the intelligence, and again, it doesn't have to be from Beroe, but the test that you have to look at is, if you are making your decisions in procurement life cycle and at any stage of that life cycle, are you basing those decisions on data that you can trust and intelligence that's truly decision grade? I think that's the big message here that, again, we've been discussing with our customers, and again, there is a reason they continue to trust what we are providing to them. And I know, again, like I said, there's a little bit of an inside track here. So we were discussing this, and my friend Valekumar here loves acronyms. So he wanted to come up with an acronym for how you think about decision grade intelligence. So I'll let him talk about that, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Prerna. I think background is that I'm actually part of a team in Beroe, which is actually called the SWAT team, which is Special Weapons and Tactics. So love these acronyms, abbreviations, and expansions. So here's the genesis. The most used sentence we at Beroe have heard procurement leaders like y'all use is, I need something I can take to the CFO or the CPO without getting torn apart, right? The key shift we have seen is what's true to what's true enough, with what confidence, with what decision making capabilities, right? So the cue for me here is that if you had to give one habit for becoming AI fluent, what would it be, right? And that's the acronym you see on your screen. Decide. Defensible, executable, contextualized, insight led, data backed, evolving, forward looking AI fluency. When you look at this from a decision grade intelligence lens, thanks, Prerna, for the term, procurement organizations should engineer the path from signals to recommendations to outcomes to feedback loop so that the decision quality improves over time. Decision grade outputs must include the whys, the so whats, the what we recommend, why why it's important to us, why should I care, plus what could be wrong, right? Transition lines in our mind is very, very solid, which is decision grade intelligence isn't more content, it's a higher standard of proof. And what's your working definition of decision grade versus market research grade, right? So what we built is basically the decide framework, and it actually goes through four litmus tests. Number one, relevance. Directly answers the decision question, not random adjacent proxy insights. Framework, not just decision making, but also what looks good, right? Based on constraints, thresholds, so on and so forth. Number two, the reliability part, evidence quality, recency, consistency across different sources. And the most important part, for what ground and use do these enterprise sources come in? Contract data, spend data, SRM notes, plus credible external sources, which we spoke about in RAG or RAG style. Number three is traceability. Can we show where the data came from and how did we conclude our recommendations? So verification, triangulation, test contradictions, recency checks, and quantifying uncertainties, right? So that's something which we build into our models too. Fourth one, actionability. Clear options, trade-offs, recommendations within acceptable or acceptance thresholds. So package it as options, risks, recommendations, and what would change our mind in case the model doesn't work. So moving on, AI fluency is not at all prompting skills. It's a workflow. That's the point we wanted to make. Essentially, it's AI acceleration, human validation, expert judgment, and then decision confidence. The overwhelmingly popular governance theme, which I want to talk about, is we have seen procurement leaders like all of you stress on permissions, audit trails, modeling out different risk rules, guardrails, controls, documenting assumptions, constraints, escalation triggers, aligning it to existing risk practices, and finally, who signs off. So, rule of thumb is that higher stakes demand higher traceability, higher recency, and challenge readiness of data quality. The most common enterprise pattern is that GenAI sits upstream, COE, strategy, procurement leadership at the decision wrapper. So that's the way I look at this. And Prerna, what have you seen, observed, heard, inferred around price, risk, and supply demand signals, please?
Yeah, I think, like you said, right, ultimately it is about, yeah, and I can see in the chat. So we are going to get to actual demos literally in the next few seconds. So I think if I just summarize all that and use some specific examples after that, it is really about alerts, which is that upstream, so news, data, raw information. How do you make that into insight, decision grade intelligence, and ultimately drive action? So, from our perspective, if we look at decision grade, AI accelerates that preparation. So, let's take pricing as an example. Ensuring there is access to price data series, various macro factors, supply demand fundamentals that can impact prices, weather patterns, and so on and so forth. AI helps get there to quickly, but and then you apply your context. So when you're, let's say, looking at a price forecast, you have to understand what is upstream and downstream of that commodity. Let's say that you're forecasting the price of what are the end use industries, and are there things that you have to put into your model, which is where the domain expertise and context comes in. And ultimately, if this is what Beroe's experts are doing, procurement leaders like yourselves can then decide with confidence. And where I see the future and the power of this AI and human combination is how can we generate more leading indicators or early signals of risks and opportunities, and not more noise. I think noise we have enough already, given there's too much data around us. But how do we truly segregate the signal from the noise? Look at that. That's, I think, a big use case, a big area that applying AI at scale and then applying the human for contextualization and validation will be a true win for all of us as a community. Being able to say, okay, if this is the intelligence, what are the scenarios? What are the trade offs and the choices? And depending on if you are big company or a mid-market business, if you are operating in a certain geography only, or if you're global in operations, how does that scenario modeling and trade-off decision making happen at scale? Again, that's where I think the combination of AI and human shines together, and ultimately having those recommendations that you can trust, right? You are not double guessing. You're not checking if this is something you should worry about. You should go and check if it's hallucination, if that data is really existing or not. Are you getting recommendations that are decision ready? So that's what I would say is the framework, and also some areas that truly are big wins if we are able to apply. And we're going to see some examples of this with Vale literally from now. So, Vale, I'll hand over to you to go from these high level, I would say, theory and the big picture view to now some specific examples because the audience is as well keen to see that.
Sure, definitely would love to do that. Thanks, Prerna. And I saw the mention about a demo, which I'm definitely going to do. If it's the Kaustav from 15 years ago, good to see you on the audience, Kaustav. So, switching gears, I'm going to jump into four quick examples. Before getting into specific examples, it's important to explain what we're trying to show. The anchor is that not all decisions need the same standard. Stakes rise, acceptable error drops, right? Basic rule of thumb. For example, if you're from chemicals, switching a critical raw material source, the focus is on validating spec equivalence, qualification timeliness, timelines, compliance risk becomes critical. If you're in BFSI, it's about third party risk and data controls, showing controls, accessing boundaries, auditability. If you're from the CPG industry on the call on the webinar right now, it's about price drivers, supply switching scenarios, along with defensible assumptions. If you're telecom, it's negotiation benchmarks, constraint mapping, risk adjusted recommendations. If you're from manufacturing, it's essentially should cost models, deltas, sensitivity ranges, and escalation thresholds. We're going to jump quickly glance through four examples in very, very quick succession. The framework of the four examples are real time, very recent, and they are the same. So you can apply the same logic to your own categories, industries, regions, grades, etc. What we mean by traditional market intel is that in each of the four slides, traditional market intel means it's unvalidated content, doesn't matter where it came from. So, Subal, what would be the first example we're going to touch upon? Is it going to be agencies?
Yes, please. Marketing and agencies.
All right, cool. So as you can see, traditional MI basically would tell you that agency fees rose 8 to 10% due to cost inflation. But when you basically unravel the mysteries of what caused this, it would get into nitty-gritties about decision grade MI, found out that campaign delays created bench capacity across agencies. So what happens is there is an increasing short-term price flexibility. So essentially, by saying it's a 8 to 10% cost inflation is useful, but it's only a cost index. The other one around bench capacity, short-term flexibility is a call to action, which basically facilitates a multitude of actions from your side. Reopen rate cards, bundle scopes, push for outcome-based pricing. And hence the focus on the term which Prerna coined, which is decision grade intel. And how do you basically build a system and a process which focuses on decision grade MI rather than random data sets stitched together in a very, very incongruent fashion? So we can move on to the next sample. What would that be, Subal? Are we going to touch upon law firms, legal services?
Yes, please. So the next up is legal services.
All right, I'll keep it really short. One of the first things which you would actually see is that the demand for law services or legal services or law firms is expected to increase over the year, right? Contributing to, for example, increase in clientele of law firms and billing rates. So traditional MI would basically say that legal fees have increased because of talent shortage and it's pushed up your hourly rates upward. But when you move into a decision grade MI with guardrails, authentic sources, multiple validations, you would find out that the real reason is that there is a slower merger and acquisition deal flow, which basically creates underutilization in corporate law practices. So by just stating that rates are going to go up is basically a fee trend, but the other one is about unused capacity. And opportunity is basically shifting from hourly billing rate to fixed fee structures and consolidating legal panels, which is a very different rehaul of your category strategy than saying that, prices are going to go up, right? So we just wanted to show that example. Should we show a couple of more examples,
Sure.
Subal?
Let's actually talk about lithium.
Sure. Let's talk about lithium then. So lithium, most of you in the space where you're looking at materials and material sciences, all of us know that lithium prices went up by, let's say, 20% last quarter, right? Anybody can Google that information and find out. But the intricacies of the category is that, for example, if you really want to understand decision grade MI about lithium, 3 weeks ago, major mines reduced output, financing issues, and then there was a huge spike, right? So one is historical data, the other one is actionable, right? So if you actually peel the onion a little bit more, the average lithium price hiked by about 13% December versus November. Reason, China's lithium market dominated by massive volatility because of GFX future movements. That basically caused underlying demand strength. Prices surged sharply. And then there was uncertainty around CATL's mining plant in the Jiangxi province in China, which is one of the world's largest lepidolite-based lithium projects. Restart, maintenance announcements, LFP value chain, prompting sellers to raise offers and withhold material. So getting into specifics around that, this affects battery and cathode producers who are contract covered and unwilling to chase rising prices is very different from actually saying that prices just went up. So the entire point about being able to understand early monthly levels, below peak monthly levels, underscoring Larry's and I'm sorry, I said that rallies and sentiment-led analysis and structural sustainability becomes your decision grade intel. So that's another example which we wanted to show. Do we have another one, or should we go into the demo, Subal?
We have one more. If we can please talk about pharma, and I see that pharma was also requested in the chat, so it's perfect that we
Yeah.
have one for them.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the most common asks which we keep getting from clients is, can you give me a supplier list for pharma R&D and CDMO, right? Yeah, you can do that. You can find it using any discovery engine or a simple prompt to find out what the CDMO landscape is. But then getting into the specifics of decision grade intel, which basically shows that the CDMO landscape by molecule type, small biologics, peptides, talking about capacity expansion announcements, headline capabilities around HPAPI, sterile fill finish, getting into decision grade supply market intel, which we didn't speak too much about. We spoke about only market intel, but supply market intel is a beast to itself, where you look at available capacity is commercial only, and it's really not accessible for phase two programs. And we might have a lot of pharma buyers who are right now in their phase two pipelines. And you'll understand that CDMOs are basically prioritizing internal pipeline molecules, which essentially means that external client onboarding basically reveals sponsor specific success rates with regulators like your US FDAs and your UMAs. So essentially, one is capability marketing. Here are the suppliers, here are their capabilities, would give you some half baked information. The other one is real time visibility into a viable execution truth with development timelines, trial sequencing, adjustments. And I think that's where your decision grade intel becomes industrial grade and industrial strength. So wanted to highlight that too, Subal.
Thank you so much, Whale. And now that we've discussed these examples, I'd also like you to walk us through what decision grade intelligence would actually look like in action. And we've seen the theory now, but I'm sure the audience also wants us to support it with real high stake procurement decisions that can happen through our platform. So over to you, Whale, please.
Sure, I'll do that once you stop sharing. So, how much time can you give me? 5 minutes, 7 minutes?
You can have 7 minutes for sure.
All right, let's do seven then.
And I
This
think
is
while Vale is putting up the demo on his screen, I just want to, as I see some of the queries in the audience or in the chat, I just want to let everybody know that we've talked a little bit about this, that Beroe's been in the procurement market intelligence space now 20 years. We have 1,000 customers globally that are using our BeroLive.ai platform, Abby, which is our conversational bot, and Vale's going to show us all this in a minute. But also the fact that our data is also available through APIs and MCPs in case you want that to be accessible in your other in how solutions, visualization tools, dashboards, other technology that you may be using. But essentially, the point we want to make is all the intelligence that you're going to see here is decision grade. So you don't have to worry about, should I verify this data? That's the work we are doing at our end. And again, Wales going to talk about this, but just headlines. We have customers across industries. I saw healthcare mentioned. We have customers there already. We cover 3,000 plus categories, both on the direct, indirect side, and we'll see some of that now with Wales. So yeah, Wales, over to you, please.
Cool. Thanks for the background. Really helps, Prerna. So what you're looking at on your screen from mine is a sample, right? We've got 3,000 different categories which we cover across 21,000 grades. But I just thought we'll pick packaging because most of you might be connected into packaging. Sorry to the BFSI buyers, but let's say we're looking at corrugated boards. So the decision grade intel is very clearly what can I basically build out which is traceable, which is comparable, and which is recent, and most importantly, has credence and confidence, right? So, for example, let's say you want to build out a category health score, right? So think of it as your Fed rates or the equivalent at Beroe, we call it the procurement beige book. How do I compare category one versus category two? Right? What are the parameters which I need to put in place so that I can actually see how hard or how soft is it to source the 800 categories in a stack rank, right? So one of the ways in which decision grade market intel is basically pushed out through the live.ai platform is through data sets which essentially help you make those decisions, right? So how do I look at four parameters which are standardized irrespective of the category: hard, soft, direct, indirect, commodity, finished product? And how do I break them into a standardized module where I can basically go ahead and present, for example, in my QBRs, in my budgeting meetings, saying that this category is in the red, this category is basically in risk. And I can actually compare everything at an organization level on a constant basis. So those decision-making frameworks and tools come out really strong when you've got the right pipeline of data, the most recent, highest veracity, so on and so forth. So that's the part on the category health score. I'm going to skip points which are probably not very critical to the tone of the conversation. The most important piece, which is essentially your price forecasts, and it doesn't matter whether this is for directs and indirects. How do I know that this data is dependable? How do I make my strategy decisions around inflation management, budgeting, cost control, negotiation, so on and so forth? And the only way you can actually do that is by ensuring that that data is accurate, right? So one of the things which we at Beroe do, for example, in corrugated boards, which I'm showing right now, is to have a constant accuracy calculator, which essentially tells you here's what the accuracy of the data is, right? So one of the most important points is to ground the data for accuracy and source referencing. So that's something which we would recommend, and that's something which we can help y'all with. So wanted to push that out. And also the reason as to why something happened, right? What happened on tariffs? What happened on tier two value chain tariffs day before yesterday, right? So what's the qualitative reasoning behind why the market changed, supply demand deltas, capacity utilizations, new suppliers, export issues, so on and so forth. So that's something which again fits into the narrative of your guided and your decision grade intel. And cost structures, very critical for your bill of material explosion. So what are all of the raw materials which basically are affected, right? How do I get all of the data piped in into a singular system so I can actually make decisions on best cost country to source? Should I basically look at labor arbitrage a little bit differently? Should I work with a manufacturer instead of a converter because we're talking about corrugated boards, right? What is the margin of my supplier? Can I squeeze or should I lay low, right? So all of those comparisons become very, very useful when you can actually unify all of this into a digital twin, right? And here's something which I personally love: all of the data which you can pipe in using data from your suppliers, your SRM systems, your spend data, so on and so forth is great. but who has basically verified that this is the right direction to make? And one of the most important things which we would recommend is please look at what different people in the value chain are saying. What is somebody in, for example, the journalism space in corrugated board saying? What's somebody who basically has been sourcing it on behalf of clients in Eastern Europe for about 30 years saying? As you can see at the bottom, that's my reference in each of these slides. What is somebody at a mill and a converter essentially saying? So these become very, very critical data sets so that you can actually make your negotiation decisions, so on and so forth. And Prerna in the beginning alluded to negotiations, right? So what are the right agents which you have in place, which basically get fed by all of these thousands and hundreds and thousands, if not millions of data sets, so that you can actually do a smart negotiation. I'm really not going to do a demo of the negotiation prep, but at any point of time, if you want to do, you can do that. Essentially, you plug in your demand locations, your price, your payment term expectations, what your goals are, what your scorecard is, so that you can actually achieve your personal goals and your business goals. And then it gives you a customized output, like a cheat sheet of sorts, right? So you can actually do that. I'm just going to show one more feature, and then I think we should be able to keep moving on. I'll probably switch to another category to avoid category fatigue. So let's say you're looking at community benchmarks, which I think is a very, very critical part of the entire decision grade intel narrative, which is essentially the ability to generate benchmarks from my peers, from my competitors, of course, in a very anonymous, in a very, very GDPR compliant, and in a fashion which is 100% ethical. And one of the things which we essentially do is give you the ability to compare where you stand versus the rest of the marketplace, right? Like I said, it's 100% anonymous, but then it gives you fantastic inputs into, for example, let's pick something which is quite interesting, right? Contract length. What do you do? Are you doing multi-year contracts or are you doing shorter contracts? What were you able to save last fiscal for this particular category? What is your targeted savings for next year, right? So me versus market. And then what's more interesting is that the access to these benchmarks allow you to narrow your cohorts, right? And what I mean by that is that, hey, I don't care about this. Show me only what industry participants in CPG said, right? So you're tightening the audience. Show me what buyers in Asia said, right? So you basically can get into specifics on my industry, my region, my type of category, and then be able to compare you as the market. Very underrepresented way of looking at market intel, but this becomes a rock solid third pillar in how you can actually look at your decision grade market intel. So just wanted to highlight that, and then back to the host.
I think just one thing I want to say in terms of, just topping it up, because I'm just seeing some of the comments in chat and I recognize that not everybody who's with us in the audience has been probably a Beroe customer or has used our offerings in the past. So, like I said, we do cover direct, indirect categories, 3,000 and more coming. But across the various areas, when we say market intelligence or decision grade intelligence, what we really give you is understanding of the supply markets, not just history, what's coming down in the future, our analysts' perspective on it, but also perspectives like Vale was showing us perspectives from across the value chain, and so on and so forth, right? So that's what you see. You also see pricing, cost intelligence, things that actually help you make decisions. And again, like we'll cover this towards the end, but I just wanted to top that up as well for everybody's benefit. So, yeah, I think Subul, you've gone to the next slide here. So,
Yes.
so I would say that, I guess, of course, the big thing here that we want to share with the group is when you look at decisions across your procurement life cycle in category management, supplier management, risk management, negotiations, I think we've come up with this broad framework that you can also apply if you'd like. But essentially, what we're saying is that if you look at decision stakes going from low to high on the x axis, and if you look at the acceptable error rate going from low to high on the y axis, you don't need decision grade intelligence in all cases, and that's okay, right? In some cases, let's say you're okay with a 80% a good enough answer. In some cases, you may want to spend the time yourself to validate and check and see how you apply it in your context, which is all fine. But there are certain decisions where the stakes are high and the error rates that you would expect are quite low. So why would you not take decision grade intelligence? There is essentially the point, and I want to cover this one by one. So if you look at this as a typical 2 by 2 matrix, what we are saying is, if your decision stakes are low and you have high acceptability of error rate in certain types of decisions you're making or certain use cases, then it's fine to use an LLM only. And let's take an example here. If what you're looking to do is, let's say, I'm going into a meeting with my business stakeholders, and I need to quickly prepare and say, okay, what is the long list of suppliers that we could potentially invite to an RFI exercise. You don't need that to be 100% vetted or accurate, because in your RFI exercise, that's already going to be the case. A lot of them may not respond, which is fine, right? So you're okay with an LLM generating a list. However, in cases where the decision stake is low, but you still don't have high acceptability of error rate, you should look for, let's say, an LLM plus then human validation, which either you are doing or you have somebody else who doesn't just use an LLM or a web scraping model, but applies the human validation on top. So, for example, you've just been brought into a new category, and it happens a lot of times. So you've just started managing a new category. You have to again go meet the business team. You don't want to sound like you don't know about that category, because it's a lot about that trust and relationship you'll build. So in that case, even something like a category 101 or a foundational report of tell me about this market, the characteristics, who plays here, etc., you want that to be something that you can really defend in that space, and you don't want to appear like you don't know what you're talking about, right? So that's your examples or use cases where decision stakes are, let's say, low. If you go on the other right hand side of this matrix, if you may, at the top, what we're saying is that the decision stakes are high because these are, let's say, big decisions you'll make, but let's say the acceptable error rate is also high. So let's take an example: long term trend analysis. Let's say I have a question: will solid state batteries replace lithium ion in 5 years? Now, yes, I will make some big decisions in terms of, let's say, my sources of supply or my R&D, or how my operating plants are running. But again, this is something that I cannot just trust an LLM or an web information. I want to apply expert judgment, but I'm okay if it's not extremely fully 95 100% accurate. It's not even decision grade, because yes, I am trying to get a directional view of whether solid state will replace lithium ion or not. It doesn't matter if it's in 5 years or 3 or 10. So your acceptable error rate is a little bit higher than you would have in other cases, right? So that's an example there. Similarly, I think on the bottom right quadrant, essentially what we are saying here is, if the decision stakes are high and your acceptable error rate is low, you definitely do need decision grade intelligence, right? For example, if you are making, let's say you have procurement finance or treasury and you have interactions there and you want to hedge, you cannot be doing that, because those could be plus minus millions that you have in actual money. That's you can't take a decision based on 80% accurate data. If you have to go into a negotiation with a single source supplier for a product or service or whatever, and you want to use a cost model, it cannot just be directionally accurate, because there's only so much you can get out in a negotiation. So you do need it to be of a certain level of accuracy. You do need it to be real and something you can trust and that you can actually use. So I think we wanted to share this sort of 2 by 2 matrix, and at least how we are looking at intelligence. And we are not saying in every case you need 100%, but I think the choice of the use case and the choice of how much effort you want to put in there on top is what should drive decisions around where you can apply AI, where you need a combination of AI and human, and so on and so forth. So with that, I think, Subal, I'll hand over to you, and you can take us forward.
Thank you, Prerna and Valekumar. If there's one thing that Prerna and Vale have shown us today, it's this. The future of procurement isn't about choosing AI. I think we've already done that. It's about knowing when to trust it and when to challenge it, because speed without judgment will just be noise, and scale without context doesn't lead to better outcomes. That's why decision grade intelligence is what will help turn AI's acceleration into real clarity. And that clarity can turn into confident action. And that's how procurement leaders like yourselves can move from activity to real impact. So it's not just about doing more, but doing what matters the most with utter confidence. All right, it's the part where we stop talking at you, we start talking with you. So if you have questions, now's the time. Please drop them in the Q&A section. And if you're curious to see how this applies to your own categories or decisions, then please feel free to scan the QR code on your screens right now to request a personalized demo. And there's no pressure, just a conversation. You'll also receive the recording of this session by tomorrow. Prerna, we do have a question for you. Where does this matter most? Category strategy, supplier selection, pricing, or risk calls?
Yeah, I would say that, I mean, it does matter in all of those areas because all of those are big decisions that procurement is looking to make. And I think the answer is it depends, right? Like if, for example, you are a seasoned category manager, you have managed that category for a very, very long time, then in that case, you don't need any you humans to be validating because you already know the fundamentals, you are tracking the market all the time. However, let's say you in that example are not a statistician and you don't have a best understanding of how to do a price forecast or how to build a cost model, in which case those are high stake decisions, pricing and negotiation, where you would want somebody or a service or a solution or a technology that you can trust, because those are big decisions you will make. I think risk management is a tricky one. And in fact, I was talking to a couple of customers this morning. I think risk is a topic where actually AI is both uh, like it's a benefit, but it's also actually a problem. So I think what we are able to do is we are able to collect a lot of information and alerts about what's happening with suppliers and their suppliers and across the world. But actually, it's more noise. So in risk, I think, yes, these are big decisions. If and you want decision grade alerts and intelligence, if it's a single source or a sole source situation, and it's something that has big reputational issues if you don't get it right. But let's say if it is something, I don't know, something you buy which is not critical and is not impacting top line, you have multiple sources, and then you're okay with not having decision grade intelligence as well. So I think the answer really depends. But overall, I would say, like we talked about that matrix, for every organization, for every category, it is about seeing where your decisions are big decisions and you don't have the time to validate and test what a plausible looking answer is. You do need trusted, validated decision grade intelligence there.
Thank you so much, Prerna. There's a question for Valekumar as well. There's lots of external information, but how do we incorporate internal wisdom and information to balance LLM with internal SLM?
Sure, absolutely, Subal. So I think the most important piece on, let's call it marrying your internal data set is to basically understand what that framework should look like, right? And what I mean by that is that how do you build a model which basically underlines what a typical failure model looks like, what's possible or what's basically plausible through wrong outputs, outdated facts, missing constraints. So the very fact that you actually are able to marry internal data with external data means you can actually put all of these guardrails in place, right? Quality, compliance, capacity, inconsistent logic, single source answers, which are basically dressed up as analysis, so on and so forth. So the very fact that you are able to look at internal versus external data helps you understand exposure, helps you understand magnitude, helps you stack rank what's important was what's not important. And the point which I kept talking about, which is very, very important, is basically governance and clear ownership, right? And one of the things which I keep stressing on is how do you basically define uncertainty, right? So very clearly, accountability is anchored to a human decision owner, right? And if challenged, the response is routed to the evidence trail internally within an organization because you're using internal data, benchmarks, assumptions, scenarios, math validation steps. So again, AI is positioned as acceleration. The sign-off strength sits within the human governance layer. So internal data helps in stronger governance layers, better credence and veracity of data. That's the way I would look at it.
Thank you, Will. Prerna, a question for you. Is there a risk of group thinking with AI that prevents potentially innovation of human thought?
I think that, I mean, again, I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm the world's expert on the impact of AI, but there is definitely a lot that, we've been discussing in smaller groups, and I've attended some sessions where I think a lot of what we are seeing with AI technology is about the social impact, right? Not so much just the economic impact and what it does to jobs and how it changes what we all do, at least let's say over the next 3 to 5 to 10 years. I think it is about that social impact. And personally, if you ask me, there is definitely uh, this thing where there is definitely that risk. At least that's my opinion. And I think if you see a lot of time now, people are prompting after they've got, let's say, a LinkedIn post written or written a answer to something or written a blog or something, they're trying a lot for the AI to then change its tone and talk more like a human, etc. Right? But everybody is using the same tactics. So there is definitely that risk of group thinking and lack of innovation. But I would say that ultimately, in my head, the big thing we have to, at least the takeaway from my side, is the AI is there to for certain purposes, right? It's great at scanning multiple sources, putting it together. It's great at identifying patterns, which, given the amount of data that's out there, it's not humanly possible anymore. AI enables us and gives us that compute capability to do things at scale, but it doesn't bring in contextual understanding and the domain expertise and that creativity, which is a very human skill. And I think it is really about harnessing the power about of what AI is good at and what we as humans are good at, and applying that at scale, which I feel is where the unlock is in terms of ultimate value, both socially and at an economic level for the community.
Thank you, Prerna. We'll take one final question for you, Valekumar, if that's okay. We've been asked, so what if my CFO asks, why should I trust this recommendation? What do I actually show them?
Yeah, I think what's important and I think people should get challenged on, how do I basically trust this information? I think what's important is always have a CFO ready pack, which basically shows decision questions and recommendations, but 2 to 3 options with trade-offs, right? Quantified by impact range, assumptions, sensitivity checks, and what would change the call, right? Just to be a little bit more specific, evidence trail, source list, recency stamp, triangulation notes, and how each claim was validated. Again, it might sound repetitive. Governance is basically what makes this very explicit. Who reviewed it, who approved it, and what's the acceptance threshold which was met for this particular decision stakes, right? So build a logic chain, impact range, and governance sign-offs. And then I think that should basically help you understand and convince the CFO on why I should trust this recommendation and what do I actually show in them. So that's the way I would look at it, Subal.
We have 2 minutes and we'll see if we can answer this one, Wave. One last question. How can we in an oil and gas company, know beforehand how market volatility will trend?
Cost models. I think that's the way I would look at it. I haven't seen the question on the chat. I was trying to answer a few others and I missed it. Cost modeling, which essentially tells you what's going to be the impact. Let's say you're looking at oil country tubular goods. What's the complex cost model and what are all the underlying contract adjustment formulae built into your nickel, molybdenum, your steel indices so that you can actually predict what's going to happen 6 months out, 12 months out, because you're buying large buys and you probably have a large EPC layout happening in the North Sea, just as an example. So the only way to do this is cost modeling and contract price adjustment formulae linked into cost models. That would be what I would recommend.
Thank you so much, Vale. And with that, thank you everyone for being here today. And we wish you confident procurement decisions every day. With Beroe, you're in the know always. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.